Happy Friday, and welcome to another episode of BrainScratch. I'm John Lorden. Thank you so much for spending some time with me here today. I've looked into a lot of cases that involve young people losing their lives, and it always breaks my heart because I think of all the second chances I've been given in life, sometimes decisions I've made that weren't the best, and how I've grown and learned from those situations. But in today's case, we're talking about someone that is so young, 12 years old. And at 12, she'd already been caring for her family for a number of years, taking care of a younger sister, and in a big way, taking care of her mother as well. Today, we're looking into the story of Georgia Lee Moses, and we are going to be joined by her younger sister later on. But first, we're going to go through all the available information that I could find from articles and sources online. We're going to start things a little bit different. We're going to start with song lyrics. Cold was the night and hard was the ground. They found her in a small grove of trees. And lonesome was the place where Georgia was found. She's too young to be out on the street. Why wasn't God watching? Why wasn't God listening? Why wasn't God there for Georgia Lee? Ida said she couldn't keep Georgia from dropping out of school. I was doing the best that I could. Oh, but she just kept running away from this world. These children are so hard to raise good. Wild flowers on a cross by the road, and somewhere a baby is crying for her mom as the hills turn from green back to gold. Why wasn't God there for Georgia Lee? That was written by Tom Waits and Kathleen Waits Brennan. If you're not familiar with Tom Waits, he's an artist from Petaluma, California, which is where this case happened, and decided to write a song about this case. On top of that, he also attended the funeral over here at Billboard.com. Waits, a father of three, sat in the back of her funeral. A lot of people came and spoke, he said. Everyone was wondering, where were the police? Where was the deacon? Where were the social workers? And where was I and where were you? So you can see him being at the funeral was kind of the start of that chain of thoughts that would turn into the lyrics. Soon after he was there, he sat down at the piano and composed the ballad. He honored and dignified Georgia. Her namesake song may be the most touching that he ever wrote. I've also heard some stories that the song almost didn't make the album, but his daughter then said, "Wait, Daddy, you wrote a song about a girl who's been kind of forgotten, and now she's going to get left off the album," and that pretty much cinched it for him. That is one of the aspects that I think has helped raise exposure for this case, has been this song. I've bumped into several different articles where this song comes up as kind of being a catalyst for someone either getting to know the case or reconnecting to the case in some way. There has been press around this case, but I have to say the press around it is, it's not the strongest. There's a lot of articles that are just giving very basic details. We've kind of run into this with cases before, but there's also articles that are just kind of using this case in a way to start other conversations about personal biases and political stances and things of that nature. Georgia's sister has faced a number of troubling emotions, I guess you could say, by seeing how Georgia's story has been handled through all this. So I am going to go through some of the sources that quite honestly are somewhat controversial, but I'm trying to weed it down to just the known facts that are contained in those sources as we're going forward. Here is a poster. It's talking about a $15,000 reward available to try to find the murderer of Georgia Lee Moses. Here they call him suspect. I believe he's more of a person of interest, but there is a composite sketch that is drawn. You can see here as well as also this picture, which isn't one that I see too often of Georgia. I wanted to start with this picture because the one that you see more frequently For some reason, a lot of people are saying that she looks older than her age. I don't personally see that, but this picture in particular, this is a 12-year-old. And I just really wanted to drill that in, and that's why I wanted to start with this photo in particular. Where does this take place? Petaluma, California. It's a city in Sonoma County, part of the North Bay subregion of the San Francisco Bay Area, located 37 miles north of San Francisco. Its population was 57,000, almost 58,000 at the 2010 census, but back at the time of this case, late 90s, kind of more in the, I think, 43 to 45,000 range. And we are going to be leaning on some newspaper articles. A lot of the digital articles are kind of disappearing on this case. Woman's body found near Highway 101, and this is from the Petaluma Argus Courier. This was posted on August 26th, or published August 26th, 1997. The badly decomposed body of a woman was found under a pine tree at the very end of Petaluma Boulevard South. It was discovered Friday by a Caltrans worker helping to fix a damaged guardrail on nearby Highway 101. An autopsy Monday did not reveal the cause of death or the person's identity. Toxicological tests are being made. I'm curious to hear that the autopsy didn't reveal the cause of death here. We're going to hear some statements from law enforcement later where they're basically citing strangulation or suffocation of some type, essentially either being choked or being smothered. And I'm not sure where that information's coming from if it's not coming from the autopsy, but this is one of those cases, like so many, where law enforcement is being very, very tight-lipped. It continues to say Monday's autopsy revealed the woman had been dead for at least a week and perhaps as long as a month. She was Black, between the ages of 18 and 40. So, we already know that we're talking about a 12-year-old here. The autopsy information, they thought that she was at least 18. Approximately 5 feet 4 inches tall and weighed approximately 120 pounds. As we continue, pretty soon, it seems like within about a week of that article, the Sacramento Bee releases another one, and it talks about the fact that they have figured out who this is. This is from August 31st, 1997. Georgia Moses' nude body was found under a tree on August 23rd, 10 days after she left home. Police said they were not informed of her disappearance until early last week. It's a really kind of interesting story in terms of how she gets reported as a missing person. Almost like a twist of fate where all that comes together. Friends said Georgia came from a troubled home where she cared for a 7-year-old sister and a mother who was ill. Continuing over at our first of the digital articles at sfgate.com, right now we're classifying it as a suspicious death, said Detective Lieutenant Mike Brown, head of investigations for the Sonoma County Sheriff's Office. Hopefully, at some point in time, we'll have all the pieces to this puzzle. Unfortunately, we're still looking for those puzzle pieces more than 23 years after the fact here. Georgia lived with her ill mother, Ida Moses, her mother's boyfriend, Ed Pope, 50 years old, and her 7-year-old sister in the working-class neighborhood of Roseland. Both adults are unemployed. Although Georgia had seen more than her share of life's difficulties, police said she had not gotten into any significant trouble with juvenile authorities. She apparently left grade school during the last school year to look after her mother. Unfortunately, I think Georgia is one of those cases that falls through the cracks, said Mary Frazier, co-managing director of the Polyclass Foundation in Petaluma. Some of you, I'm sure, out there have already made this connection. Petaluma is where the Polyclass disappearance and murder happened as well. Quote, her mom was not capable of parenting. Georgia appeared to be taking care of her mom. Lieutenant Brown said the county's Office of Child Protective Services was aware of the family's troubles, but there were no reports of abuse. Georgia's younger sister has recently been removed from her mother's home. Georgia was last seen alive at about 10 p.m. August 13th near the intersection of Sebastopol Road and Dutton Avenue in Santa Rosa, a busy corner less than a mile from her home. She was wearing blue jeans, a white shirt, and a white nylon windbreaker. So the basics of this story are she's not living at home because the boyfriend of the mother and her are having some form of disagreement. So Georgia is staying with friends, it seems like, at this time. She's at a friend's home. She gets paged. Georgia has a pager, and we're going to ask her sister more about that when she comes on. She calls back the number that has paged her. Her and her friend, it's reportedly her best friend, go walking to this location that we've just talked about, to a gas station or a Jack in the Box there. I've kind of seen it written both ways. There, a man pulls up in a white car. Georgia gets into the car, leaves, and that's kind of the last time that she has been seen. So let's go ahead and just take a look at the intersection. Now, unfortunately, we're talking about a case from 1997, and Google Maps does not go back nearly that far. So this is the intersection. We've got a Jack in the Box on one side. It's labeled as a 7-Eleven here, but it's a full gas station, and it's got a different brand. I can't remember what it is off the top of my head. 76, Union 76. I don't know if it was that back in 1997, though. So it's either this gas station on this side of the intersection or the Jack in the Box over here. One of these two locations is where her friend and her walk to. She gets in the car with this guy, and that's it. It's the last time she's seen. So let's cut over to this map. On the north side of it, this is the marking for where the gas station or the Jack in the Box is. And where her body is found is around this area. It looks like it's about 19 miles south of there. And from what I understand, there's been a lot of construction around the highway down in this area, so I don't know if this even looks the same anymore. But here's Petaluma Boulevard South, and this is what the articles are saying. She was found at Petaluma Boulevard South, close to the 101. It does continue running along the 101. I don't know if it's close to, if this on-ramp is still the right one that they're talking about, or if it's further up here. There's this spot where Petaluma kind of goes under the 101, but regardless, somewhere in this stretch is where her body was found, about 19 miles south of where she was last seen, but also days later, which we have to keep in mind as well. Cutting back to newspapers.com, this is from, once again, the Argus Courier, but this is September 16th, 1997. Very quickly, they get an identification of what's called the suspect, but is actually more of a person of interest. It's that guy that her friend sees Georgia leave with. Deputies said the suspect has been described as follows: a black male, 25 to 30 years old, 6'2" to 6'4", about 200 pounds, closely cropped black hair, medium complexion, slight mustache, driving a small white four-door vehicle. The next article I could find was once again from the Argus Courier, but this is from September 26th, and it's noting that Georgia and her mother were helped by an organization called COTS in 1991. The mother, homeless and fated to suffer a progressively deteriorating mental disability, got help at COTS in 1991 and eventually found housing. When she lost that rental, the family moved in with a boyfriend named Eddie Pope in Santa Rosa. It was in Santa Rosa that young Georgia Moses was on the verge of young womanhood, caring both for her younger sister Angel, 7 years old, and her mother. But Georgia's friends have acknowledged that the group of girls were starting to, quote, get with the boys and take risks they shouldn't have. So COTS, just to let you guys know, looks like they're still there, but in that time, between the years of 1988 and 2004, they operated a winter-only shelter for single adults in multiple locations. First a bookstore basement, then in local churches, swim center, and later at an armory. COTS also operated a drop-in center located next to a community kitchen that dispensed free meals. Families were served with temporary shelter at an isolated building on the south side of town. Just sounds like a wonderful organization that's trying to help these families in need, and Georgia and her mother did wind up there for a little period of time. This same article gives us a little update from the investigators. The county sheriff's investigation into her murder has been having a difficult time, according to Sergeant Kirk Spaulding. We're not having great success, he said Thursday, but we've got some good information from the Georgia Moses hotline that needs to be followed up. Spaulding could not confirm whether the department is investigating the circumstances surrounding a party in Petaluma that Georgia reportedly planned to attend on the night of her disappearance. So earlier part of this article, we're talking about that her friends are saying, we were starting to get involved with boys. And actually, I think it might be more accurate to say men, considering the suspect we're looking for is being described as someone in his 20s. But then here we're also hearing there might have been a party that night. I'm seeing other information reportedly from her friend that is saying she does think that Georgia was going to a party. Georgia called her later that night and said, "I'm not going to be coming back tonight." And that's the last that we've heard from Georgia. Spalding said detectives have traced Georgia's movements and friends in San Francisco, Marin County, and throughout Sonoma County, but haven't been able to trace the victim beyond a last sighting August 13th in Santa Rosa. Ida Moses told the Argus Courier she doesn't believe her boyfriend should be a suspect in the case, but a close friend said the opposite. Police searched his apartment but have not said if he is a suspect. So one of the things I've run into about Ed Pope is he seems to have a criminal past that does include possibly being inappropriate with children. I don't know if that's a factor in terms of why Georgia was no longer living at home or not. We'll try to ask her sister a little bit more about that when we speak to her later. But Ida is coming out fairly straightforward here, saying she doesn't think that he's a factor in any of this and does not think that he should be considered a suspect in the case. Of course, with a history like that, I think it makes sense that police have searched his apartment, but I'm not sure about the feasibility of him being really tied to this case as well. If we have Georgia effectively staying with other people, being reached out to by someone else, obviously her friend isn't saying, "Oh yeah, it was her mother's boyfriend that came and picked her up." Obviously her friend's recognizing it was someone else that came and picked her up. So could he be connected to this? Yes. Do I think it's a pretty strong chance? Not particularly, even kind of considering his criminal background. In January of 1998, we have the reward get increased by an additional $10,000. That brings it up to $15,000. And it's saying that the reward, it looks like this was done by donors, that they contributed this additional $10,000 to the reward. Of course, it always lifts my spirit when I see communities trying to help in cases like this. But as you can see from the coverage, like I'm not stating the main facts over and over and over because I'm, just trying to save you guys from hearing the same thing over and over. But all these articles are basically just saying 12-year-old whose body discovered next to a tree next to Highway 101, and they're just repeating the same very few basic facts over and over with each instance of this case. It's strange to me because for this time period, like when I look at cases of this age, I usually find writers that are doing a little more work, to be fair. Like, where's the interview? We're hearing mention of things that her friends are saying, but I'm not seeing any quotes from any of her friends. What about other people in her life? It doesn't seem like there's a very strong effort going in terms of an investigative journalist that has taken this on and is, really trying to dig into this case. And for nowadays, unfortunately, that's kind of common. We're getting this kind of police blotter, repeat the same 5 points and put them on every different, major media website you can. For this time period, it's kind of surprising to me, quite honestly, that I'm not finding deeper articles. And I think that aspect is even part of why Tom Waits might have even picked this up and thought about it as a song. I mean, there's enough coverage so that there's a body that's found out by the road and it has a name. The body has a name attached to it. But the real humanity of who Georgia is just is not coming through in these articles at all. And it does raise a question, why is that happening with this case in particular? And I'm trying to not make these comparisons too much because I know her sister has made some very strong and honestly some very smart statements about this comparison. But Polly Klaas case happened in this area, and I'm seeing so much reference to Polly Klaas, even in terms of these articles. I can see that it really grabbed the heart of the area. And it just kind of raises a question, well, why isn't Georgia's case grabbing that heart the same way, or at least maybe grabbing the media's attention in the same way? So Angel, Georgia's sister, wrote, "Stop comparing her story to that of Polly Klaas. This insinuates that Polly's life did not warrant the national media attention that she received. Reality is, Polly Klaas received the very attention and outcry that she deserves, that every child deserves." So I think she's making a really good clarification there. It's not about trying to say, well, the whole country went crazy over the Polly Klaas case and there was something wrong with that. It's more of a question of, why isn't Georgia's case grabbing us in the same way? And why aren't we having an outcry for, hey, look at what's happened here? Justice is deserved in this situation too. Thankfully, I think some people do start noticing, and we do have things like this from September of 1998, once again in the Argus Courier, "Slain Girl Not Forgotten." We have a memorial where 30 people gather, a garden that has basically sprouted up in this area. There's no official volunteer schedule, but you need water to keep things alive out there, and people are just coming by just to water the plants and do this. And then this beautiful memorial shows up there of an angel, this kind of metal structured angel that is really, really awesome. It wouldn't be until 5 years later that someone really starts trying to draw out the sad tragicness of the coverage that has been around this case as well. A writer named Lois Perlman put out this piece in October of 2003. And it starts with a little bit of that comparison, but that's where the similarities end. While Polly Klaas was America's child, Georgia Lee Moses was America's throwaway child, according to those who mourned her death in 1997 and the way it was treated by the community. While Polly's abduction and death was front page news around the country, Georgia's tragedy was relegated to short news stories about the discovery of her body, which is unfortunate, but is certainly evident from the information that I'm finding on this case. I'm just really thankful that her sister Angel is going to join us and hopefully give us some better detail and help us dive into this more, because there's just, the articles are kind of thin. That beautiful steel angel sculpture that I mentioned earlier was made by 2 firefighters and placed there. I really think that's awesome. But then there's something that happens that almost feels, feels like a little tap of fate on the shoulder to remind us about this. So there is this woman named Maureen. She owns the Petaluma Mail Depot, and she heard the song, Tom Waits' song, Georgia Lee, on a local radio station. She learned that it was written about someone that she actually knew. She once lived near Moses, and she decides that she's going to take some friends and go out to the memorial. She goes out there and finds it to be kind of overgrown. There's weeds. It hasn't been taken care of. But amongst all that stuff, she finds a note. And apparently it's a note left by someone in the city or something that says the sculpture needs to be relocated because there's highway construction that's coming on. They're basically going to kind of reform or reshape that area, and that sculpture can't be there anymore. I've heard in other stories where memorials, especially around road construction, they'll just kind of get knocked down or they'll get removed or something along those lines. So it's just this very strange twist of fate that Maureen happens to go out there, finds the letter in time, and then takes it upon herself to get that relocated. So the statue does wind up relocated at City Hall. The article continues that it stands as a reminder that as a community, we need to watch each other's backs and take care of each other. And despite the fact that we have these articles kind of calling out the level of news coverage for this case, we have people caring for a statue in her honor, getting it moved, the news just seems to dry up again on this case until in 2017, we get another retouch on it with an article called "Remembering the Victim of Petaluma's Sad Unsolved Murder." 20 years later, many questions remain. Would Georgia Moses still be alive had news of her disappearance been widely disseminated? Was law enforcement slow to act because the victim was black, a middle school dropout, living with her disabled mother in poverty? Why hasn't her murder been solved after all these years, her killer brought to justice? In 2006, inspired by Moses' story, Leah Rowley founded Santa Rosa's The Children's Village, a home for neglected and abused children. The nonprofit lasted for 10 years, but was closed in early 2006, having lost crucial funding resources. I've found some other information. I don't know if it was a different version of The Children's Village, but there's another one that continued until recently, and its funds actually got ported into a different charity. But that one also cited Georgia as being part of their inspiration. And it was also called the Children's Village, so I'm kind of confused about this one being closed. But essentially, you have people that are trying to help kids potentially in the same situation by bringing them into these group living environments. From what I understand, the one that closed more recently is because the state has changed kind of its approach with those cases. It's trying to not have children live in those group environment situations and is trying to get them into more of the direct foster care system. So I guess the board decided that it was time for them to end that. But you know, it always moves me when I see what people do in other people's honor, and to know that Georgia in some way helped get some other kids off the street for at least a period of time of 10 years. And I'm telling you guys, I think it was longer than that because of this other organization that I found as well, is pretty amazing. But there's something else amazing about all this. Over at PressDemocrat.com, here is a picture of Angel Turner. And you can see she's holding a sign that says "Justice Now," and on her chest is her sister, Georgia. A Santa Rosa girl whose murder has gone unsolved for more than 2 decades was remembered Thursday afternoon at Petaluma City Hall, where roughly 30 people gathered for a memorial walk on what would have been her 36th birthday. And this is happening in January of 2021. Moses' sister, Angel Turner, 30, flew in from Texas to attend the memorial walk, which she helped would draw new attention to the unsolved murder. She remembered her sister as the caretaker of their 3-person household, doing the laundry, and learning how to pay bills with the Social Security checks that were sent to their mother, who was bipolar and had schizophrenia. Whoever has responsibility in her death, they're going to be held accountable, and rightly so, she said. You took a life. So the proper thing, if you take a life, is that you answer to the criminal justice system. The gathering began at Petaluma City Hall, where a metal angel sculpture memorializing Moses has stood since 2012. Attendees looked at photographs and artwork of Moses, then marched around downtown Petaluma chanting, "Justice has no expiration date," and other messages before returning to City Hall. So one of the first comments that I see from law enforcement for years on this case, at least in terms of the articles I've been able to dig up, the Sonoma County Sheriff's Office Violent Crimes Unit is overseeing the agency's investigation into Moses' case. Sonoma County Sheriff's Office spokesman Juan Valencia said, "Every case involving a suspicious death or those that are ruled a homicide are handled with the same level of care at the agency, though investigations into more recent crimes are given priority," he said. That's kind of an unfortunate statement to think about. I understand that's the reality of it. You know, if they have a current case come in, they're going to pull their resources to that. But does that mean that the older a case gets, that the other old cases in front of it get processed before that one? I don't know how they handle that type of rotation. But back to his quote, "It's considered a cold case. As detectives' time becomes available, they spend time working cold cases. They go back, look through reports, reevaluate the evidence, and come up with new leads, or as new leads come in, they work those." You guys know I believe in raising exposure, and when you have a sister step forward like that, show up to an event, talk to the press, got some quotes going, she's also starting to get active on social media, it can really affect things. It can make a difference. And we can see that article was posted in early January. Just within a few weeks of that article coming out, all of a sudden we have the sheriff's office releasing a statement on their Facebook page. And essentially, they're asking for help on this case again. And it starts with, you may have recently heard about the Georgia Lee Moses case. So it's clear that they're hearing about the new press on this case. So memorial events like that, very, very big step. We get just a little bit more detail, so I'm going to run you through the story one more time, but there's just a few things that they're adding here. August 22nd at about 2 p.m., Georgia's body was found next to the Highway 101 southbound on-ramp at Petaluma Boulevard South. She didn't match any missing persons reports, and her body was badly decomposed. On August 25th, Santa Rosa Police Department received information from an anonymous person that Georgia had been missing for 2 weeks. They took a report and issued a flyer to local law enforcement agencies with the description of Georgia. The detective in charge of Georgia's case saw the flyer and noticed it matched the description of the body found 3 days earlier. The body was identified as Georgia on August 26th. Through the death investigation and autopsy, we determined Georgia died of asphyxia by being strangled or smothered. Through forensic evidence, we determined she died sometime between the night of August 13th and early morning of August 14th. We do our best to find justice for every violent crime victim and their families. We are asking, again, for the community's help. Georgia was last seen at approximately 10 p.m. on Wednesday, August 13th, 1997, near the intersection of Sebastopol Road and Dutton Avenue in Santa Rosa. She was a 12-year-old black girl, 5'4", approximately 120 pounds, shoulder-length, braided black hair, last seen wearing a white shirt with a white nylon windbreaker and blue jeans. Last seen with a 25 to 30-year-old black man, approximately 6'2" to 6'4", around 200 pounds, very short black hair, driving a small white four-door car. This man is a person of interest whom we have not been able to identify. His sketch is posted below. And once again, here is that sketch. So at this point, I need someone to help me in terms of understanding this story. And I don't think there's anyone better than not only Angel, Georgia's sister, but an advocate that has been helping Angel, and her name is Maria. Let's go ahead and meet them right now. And joining me now is Angel Turner, and she also has her advocate, Maria Martin, with her. Maria isn't going to be on camera, but she's going to kind of jump in and help us with the conversation as we roll along. Hey, Angel, how you doing today?
Doing pretty well. How are you doing?
Good, good. I know we kind of spoke a little bit before we started recording, but I just want to say it again that, like, my heart is so heavy, not just for the tragedy that you're facing with your sister, but for a lot of what you've been dealing with the media around this as well. And can you just, for our audience, give them a little insight into your aspect on how the media's coverage of Georgia's case has been going over the years?
To put it, I guess how it needs to be put, they did a piss poor job. Over the years, I want to say around when I was 19 up until up until now, really, I would Google my sister, because the police were doing their job. So I would just kind of see like where it's at and what new leads and stuff like that without having the police department. And I would Google her name and it would be the same stories that I would find. But after reading a few words, I would have to like just stop. Because it was always the narrative of her being a troubled kid, her coming from a terrible background, and basically saying that she was the cause of her death. And not even really understanding like how the media portrays things. It was just like, where are they getting this information, and why are they telling the story of somebody that I viewed completely different,
Yeah.
And it started to make me question whether I remembered somebody different. because it was just like, I don't remember her being bad. I don't remember her being, just this troubled person. I remember her being full of love and so caring. So when I found the Facebook page last year and people were just sharing all these stories, it really just confirmed that the person I remembered was factual and the person that the media created was fictional.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. And I'm even seeing conflicts in the information that I'm finding too. I'm finding, oh no, she never got into trouble. And then, oh yeah, she, would interact with police on a regular basis, would disappear for days on a regular basis. Like it's very, very unclear, even looking through the articles. They're just all over the place. And none of them are really diving into who Georgia was as a person. None of them are very strong in terms of like, here's teachers that knew her and here's friends and what they thought. I mean, it's just, I explained it to you earlier. I hate saying it this way, but it's like her story starts with her being found off that highway. And it doesn't develop much in terms of who she is as a person. So of course we're going to try to rectify that as we're going here. But before we get to that, what are some of the rumors out there that you're having to dispel? I've seen you kind of talk about that in some posts, that you're having to dispel some of the rumors around the media. What are the biggest ones that you want to kind of just knock off the table?
The biggest one was that she was a troubled kid. My sister, she would literally give the shirt off her back. Her heart was just so big. She cared about any and everyone. She believed in standing up for what was right, no matter who was involved. So to say she was this troubled kid that just kind of went through life, it was just like, she wasn't.
Yeah.
She tried to make people's lives better, and in talking to some of her friends, it was just like, she was the constant shoulder to lean on. She was their therapist. She was their place of refuge. Also, and I know we talked about it briefly, the whole prostitution notion.
Yeah.
My sister was 12. At that age, they don't consent to sex. The proper term is being trafficked, sex trafficking, child trafficking, whichever version you want to use.
Yeah.
But in the stories that mention it, they say, oh, she lived a promiscuous lifestyle and, she partook in these activities, opposed to saying she was a victim.
Right.
She was a 12-year-old child that was taken advantage of.
Right.
Even for the people there's a few articles that speculated on, oh, this was seen and this pattern. And it's like, well, if this was seen, why didn't anyone step in? So it's like they talk about how independent she was and how, street smart she was, but they failed to say she was still a child.
She's 12 years old. She's 12 years old and an amazing 12-year-old. Don't get me wrong. She's taking care of her 7-year-old sister. She's in a way taking care of her mother, or responsibilities for her mother around this as well. And that was going on for a number of years, right? It's not like she just turned 12 and all of a sudden started doing that. There's this real heartbreaking aspect in terms of, did you ever get to see her be a child? Did you ever get to see her just have fun?
The only time I saw her have fun was when she was trying to allow me to have fun, so when she took me to the park, or, when we had pillow fights, or when she was dancing, those were her moments of being just free spirited.
Yeah.
I know she had fun with her friends, just from the stories that she shared, but, the most childlike I saw her was when she interacted with me, which is weird because that was like the most adult she was, as far as just taking on responsibilities.
Right.
But yeah.
I earlier today watched a real heartbreaking video that you posted about an article written that was titled "A Reminder to Remember Georgia Moses," which, in my opinion, used your sister's story as kind of a springboard for the writer to go off on a rant about their terrible preconceived notions and biases, and really didn't focus on the information that can actually help raise awareness or the actionable elements of the case. As a matter of fact, didn't even include the police phone number, I think, at the end. I'm just really sad that this story has been treated this way. But I'm thankful that you are now finding your own voice. It looks like there's been a big change over the past year, really, where this case is getting some more traction, getting some more exposure. And I think that's probably because of your hard work and this community that you found of people that were still caring and trying to remember. So help us understand a little bit more. What's the family layout? Are there other siblings?
So I have two older brothers, well, by my mom. And my oldest brother, he is 47. And then my next younger brother, he's 43, 43, 44, 43.
Oh, okay.
But at that time, they were living in New York. And that's where my sister was born. That's where I was born. We were both born in New York. And so we moved to California, I believe, when I was 2. So we were there for 5 years.
Okay. So four kids in total, but the 2 brothers had stayed behind. Okay. And what was Georgia like, and what was she interested in? Like, what types of hobbies? And
she loved to dance. That was her thing. It's actually really ironic because when I moved, following her death, I went and stayed with my aunt, and I remember it was like within the first week of being there, we were just all, playing around, having fun. And my cousin, she was, I want to say 15, 16, and she was just dancing, And I remember in that moment, like I thought she was Georgia, and it was just like, okay, like it was kind of like an out of body experience.
Yeah.
And I always wonder, like, why did that remind me of her? And just hearing the stories that her friends keep sharing, it was just like, because that's what she did. She always danced, but she didn't, she danced around me, but I think she danced more with her friends because it was a different dynamic we had.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was her thing. And anything, like, she was really goofy, she was always like being silly and like telling jokes and, pranks and stuff like that. She was just a fun kid,
Did she ever prank you?
She did once that I remember vividly. I had this Barney cup, and like she had poured like some milk and water. Like she just made this concoction. And I think I was like getting on her nerves or something. But I remember, like, because I was spoiled, in hindsight.
You're the baby, right?
Right. And she definitely spoiled me. And so like I would just want what I want when I wanted it.
Mm-hmm.
And a few times, she would kind of like just check me, be like, okay, but
she fouled your Barney cup. I mean, come on.
Yeah, she did, and I didn't even like Barney, so I don't even know why I had a Barney cup, I was a Scooby-Doo type of girl, but yeah, she mixed some concoction and was like, here you go, and I was just like, but those are very few. She reserved that for other people.
Yeah. Yeah. Did she ever mention, I know she was only 12 years old and she's already handling a lot, but did she ever mention what she wanted to do with her life in terms of career or?
I never knew, but there was an article I found where one of her friends said she wanted to be a nurse. And I believe it. She loved helping people. When I first read it, I was a little skeptical because I was just like, oh, I don't know about that.
Yeah.
But I believe it. She just had a heart for people. And it's like she was drawn to making things better, making them better at the expense of her. So yeah. I believe it.
Well, looking at what we understand about the home life and what was going on there, I mean, it's almost her survival mode, right? I mean, she's in the mode of trying to make things better for herself, for you, for your mom, handling those responsibilities. So yeah, I could definitely understand how she was kind of wired for that. right from the start. When's the last time that you saw her?
It was that night.
It was
Um,
that night.
Correct.
What do you remember?
I remember now two memories. The first one being, well, technically three memories. We were walking back home. I don't know, it was nighttime, but we were walking back home, and there was an encounter, like somebody was approaching the distance we were coming. So we're kind of like crossing paths. And I remember waving to that person, and my sister told me to run up a little bit. And I remember her handing him her pager, and then I guess he gave a number, and then he handed it back. And then we went home. She did my hair. She always did my hair. So she, put in little ponytails with the barrettes and stuff. And then she tucked me in, she kissed me, and she left.
Yeah. Yeah. The pager raises a lot of questions. It raises questions for me as well. I did find a piece of an article. The original article seems to have disappeared, but it was quoting Sheriff's Detective Russ Davidson. And it kind of mentions the pager just a little bit, talking about the suspect. He's saying this is someone that she knew. He would page her and meet her occasionally. He also goes on to say that Georgia was advanced beyond her years in terms of her development, her responsibilities. It wasn't uncommon for her to be away from home for days at a time. That conflicts a little bit with the information, because you were saying she was pretty much coming home at least once a day to see you for a little bit, right?
Right. So at this point, my sister didn't live with us. My mom's boyfriend, he was a child molester. And so, there was an incident where I guess he tried to do stuff to her, and she checked him.
Yeah.
And so he got upset and gave her an ultimatum. And so she wound up leaving. But she would still come back, like, I guess because I was her baby,
She's keeping an eye on you. Yeah.
Right. So she would come back. I don't know if it was like every single day, but I know that when time came where she wasn't coming back daily or every other day, that was suspicious to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He goes on from there and says Georgia did nothing to contribute to her own death. She wasn't dealing drugs. She wasn't in a gang. She was a pure victim. But back to just some questions about the pager, because I remember, late 90s having a pager. Like, you couldn't just go pick up a pager at a store. Like, you had to have a contract. It was like having a cell phone, essentially. And to think a 12-year-old would be able to strike up a contract like that isn't really feasible. Do you know where the pager came from?
I don't specifically. I have my own theories, but, just given that she didn't have a home per se, like I know people took her in, but I also know that somehow they got her involved in being trafficked. And, my sister, she was responsible, so, and especially once we, because we were evicted where we lived. And so we went and moved with my mom's boyfriend. But she was kicked out before we went to live with him. But, she helped pay the bills. She went and bought groceries. So just having to picture her take care of herself. I don't know if she had to pay rent where she was at. I'm assuming she did, just based off, the nature of the people.
Right.
And then still supplying for us. I feel like she was put in a situation where she had to earn her way.
Yeah. And thankfully, I think everyone is a lot more aware of trafficking nowadays. Back at that time, I think we didn't quite have the education and concepts around it. Control mechanism is a big aspect to that. So, of course, controlling where she would live, controlling her access to resources like money and stuff like that, and knowing that oh, we've got this girl that needs this because she's got a little sister she's trying to take care of, and her mother, and all those situations would certainly make her a target for that as well. So it seems like that's a likely component. Do you know, was the pager ever investigated? I mean, it's kind of the link in terms of contact to where she goes that night.
From my understanding, it was looked at, and whoever was, suspicious, that they were cleared. So, yeah.
So we're almost talking about a situation where we're moving the time frame out a little bit, and maybe whatever happened to her didn't happen at that party at that particular place, but something after that.
It's possible. If you look at any of the posts that I say, one of my biggest things is, she was last seen at 10, like by a witness, and her body was found weeks later.
Right.
They suspect her time of death is around this time, but that's still a guesstimate. So with there being so much lapse in time, I just feel like anything could have literally happened.
Yeah.
It's too much time for there to be this is what took place,
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Just to clear the board a little bit, because a lot of people hear, your mother's boyfriend has a criminal past, includes sex crimes against children. Do you think that he has anything to do with what happened to her?
I don't.
Okay.
It's just something that I feel like I've always felt, I just feel like he wasn't capable of that. And not to say that's an excuse, because anybody can do anything given the circumstance. I just feel like in my heart that he didn't do it. He didn't have any responsibility in it.
Yeah. Well, and it seems kind of strange. Like, this would be a different condition if, we heard about the disagreement they had. He told her that she had to move out, but before she moves out, she disappears. Like, then we're looking.
But this was like a 6-month time frame.
Yeah.
Well, 4 or 5 month time frame.
Yeah. So she's already got herself to kind of safety, or at least a new situation that's different from that situation.
Right.
Where she's not interacting with him regularly. Okay. So the suspect sketch, does that remind you of anyone that you can remember from back at that time?
It doesn't. My memory back then, like, there's very specific people that I recall.
Yeah.
And, the only person that I knew that even had an inkling of who it could be was one of my sister's friends. She's kind of been adamant on who she believes it is. But, from my knowledge, I don't think that person was ever questioned back then. But to me, he's just a person in a sketch. Like, he doesn't jog any memory, any recollection, nothing.
Well, it's interesting because if I remember correctly, the sketch is really based on who is the guy that comes and picks her up from and by the way, is it the Jack in the Box or the gas station? Do we know which side of the street?
The gas station.
It's the gas station. Okay. So the guy comes and picks her up, and he's in the white 4-door smaller car. And it's that guy. So if that's the same guy that's connected to the pager phone number, then he's kind of been cleared in some way.
Can I jump in
here
really quick?
Please do.
So with that sketch, there are 2 people, from what we understand, that sort of resemble pretty closely what that sketch was. One, I believe, from the cold case officer that we spoke with, one had been cleared, another had not been looked into. So even though the timeline might excuse whoever was in that sketch, there hasn't been a conversation with the second person they believe looked like that. Like, more than one person believes that sketch looked spot on for someone.
Okay. But even the information they put out at the time, they were saying really that was a person of interest, right? Like, not necessarily a suspect, but someone they wanted to talk to.
Yeah. As far as we know, there's no suspects. There are only persons of interest. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Thank you for that clarification, Maria.
Yeah, no problem.
So knowing that they were at the gas station, I would imagine the gas station had cameras. Do we know if that was investigated?
Mm-mm.
We don't know, or it wasn't.
I mean, I'm guessing it wasn't. If
Okay.
I mean, I can't say for certain.
Yeah.
I know when I question the gas station, they obviously don't go back that far in time as far as keeping footage.
Yeah. Well, and we have, the discovery of her body, over a week later. And if it is a camera, sometimes they're on loops where they'll write themselves over after a certain amount of days or something. So it's possible that they could have investigated it, went back to the gas station, and, the footage wasn't available. Or it's possible they did get some form of footage and maybe it's sitting in a police file somewhere. I don't know. They seem to be being pretty tight-lipped with details around this case.
A few details they have, yeah.
Yeah. So the friend that Georgia was with when she got the page and she called this guy back, that's another linkage. So they had to have traced this guy down because Georgia gets the page but uses her friend's phone to call the guy, right? Mm-hmm. So you would think there's a phone record there that they could go back to and find that phone number.
From what the conversation I had, that wasn't done, because I asked if that was vetted. If somebody called the house, you just pull the record.
Yeah.
And it was said that, oh, well, if we were to go back in time and pull those records, they wouldn't be in existence. And so it's like, why wouldn't that be done? Right away. I don't know if when they actually spoke to the witness, a certain amount of time had passed. Because from my understanding, the sketch came out like a few years later, I want to say. I'm guessing. I don't really know.
I think it's a year, but yeah, I'll see if I can double check that while I'm going through it.
So I don't know how phone records were kept back then.
It's actually there is a decent point there. This is something I forgot about. Back in the wired phone days, I know that at least your phone bill wouldn't show local phone calls that you had made. So if it was like a local number, it wouldn't even show up on your bill. Your bill would only show you things that they would charge you for, which typically would be long distance numbers. So that could be why maybe the records wouldn't even capture that type of phone call back at the time. But I would imagine the phone company would still have some way of doing that if they looked at it back at that time. Now, as a cold case investigator going back, yeah, I'm positive that the phone companies wouldn't be able to do anything on that. Have you heard of any potential cameras that could have picked up any part of this? Has that been any discussion with investigators?
Mm-hmm. No. They're like you said, they're really tight-lipped about what they're releasing. And just from me asking the Jack in the Box, the gas station, there's nothing to get. So if nothing was gotten at that time, then that time frame was closed to get anything.
Yeah.
Sorry, can I add one quick little thing here? Mm-hmm. So I actually spoke with a friend who lived right near that corner back then. That's where she and her dad lived. And she had mentioned that she didn't believe that there were outside cameras at that gas station at the time because she was not the greatest of kids and used to shoplift from that gas station.
Okay.
She said that she kind of knew that there was one inside, but she didn't think that there was any outside. That is just speculation and of a 24-year-old memory, but it just jogged that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a good point. And I don't know for that time frame, it's not like nowadays where cameras are $20 and you can put them anywhere.
Right. Right. And back then, not even back then, really still now, but back then especially, you had to hardwire everything.
Right. Right. Yeah. So
if you can just pop one up on the outside and glue it, you had to hardwire everything.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm just curious, the description of the person of interest, did that come from Georgia's friend? Because she walked there with her, right?
Yes.
Okay.
It did.
Okay. And when they do find Georgia's body, we have no clothes on it. And has there been any mention of any of the clothing being found at any point?
So, short answer, no.
Okay.
But last year, someone had reached out on Facebook, and they recalled a day. They don't remember the specific day, but they remember that it was a day around that time my sister was found in Petaluma, where clothes were found outside of their business. And she said that it looked like something violent had happened. So, they called the police, and the police came and took it. So when I spoke to the detective about it, I was just like, was there any, like, did they contact or put any reports out to say, like, hey, maybe these clothes could have been, let's check them, test them. And a few months had passed, and I asked him again, like, hey, did anything come of it? And he's like, oh, well, I would need her information. And I was like, why do you need to get in contact with her when you can just check the report or the police department and see if there was anything at that time frame that could have connected some dots? And he said, if there was any clothes found, they would no longer be in evidence at this point.
That might be true, but if there's a report written on it that says it's jeans.
That was him to say that they didn't look at it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So
yeah,
there's whatever that situation was, nobody cared enough to say, oh, let's see if it's here. Or if they did, they didn't put it in the report to say these clothes do not belong to her.
Right.
So.
Wow. I'm sensing some frustration. Are you frustrated with the investigators? You are. Yeah. I think that's understandable when you've been looking at this for this long. And are you hearing about any movement or developments?
There's a little traction. I know they've begun interviewing people again. They did take the DNA that's on file to get tested. So we're waiting to get retested.
So we have DNA?
Some form, yes. I don't know the extent of it, but they do have something that is testable. But most of the work is done on our end. I remember when the detective first reached out, I gave him the suspect list or people of interest list.
Yeah.
I was like, hey, you might want to check into these like 10 people. And every few months when I would check in, nothing was done. And I'm like, if you guys in an interview or check into these people back then, and you're still not, being compelled to do it now, then you just don't care, and you still don't care.
Yeah.
Like, we shouldn't have to bring you information to get vetted.
Right.
There's been things that I've shared and they're like, oh, I didn't know that. Or, like it was just news to them. And I'm like, if you did a simple investigation, certain things would have been standing out to you.
Yeah. Yeah. That's got to be frustrating. That's got to be really frustrating. But I think you're kind of taking the right steps now with the latest approach, keep pushing the awareness, making noise, because it seems like even since that started, now they've kind of put out a reminder, hey, we're asking the public again for help on this case. And it seems like even the way that's written, they're kind of not being defensive, but they're trying to be clear about here's everything that we did, like here's everything we did at the time, and here's everything we're going to do. I'm pretty excited to hear that there's something in terms of DNA. Just because with the tools that we have nowadays, like, come on, the genetic genealogy angle, there's a lot that can be done if they can get that sample kind of cleared up and start putting it into play.
Right.
Yeah. Definitely keep my fingers crossed on that. Why wasn't a missing persons report filed for her kind of back at that time? Do you know what the hang up was there?
So from my understanding, the way my mom's condition was, um, she was in and out of reality. And so, to me, she was the person that was a constant. So it didn't really trigger my mom when she wasn't present, because most of the time when she would show up for me.
Yeah.
My mom would either be asleep or, just in her own little world. So we did the most interaction. And I don't even know if my mom would have known, honestly, like, oh, missing persons report.
Right.
But when she was finally reported missing, that was on the day where the police came to question about my mom's boyfriend. So from my understanding, back around the time my sister was kicked out, the DA had, I guess, filed a motion or charges, something to that extent, on my mom's boyfriend, because they were aware that he was a sex offender, he was convicted, and he's living in a house with children. For whatever reason, at that time, which was April, nothing was done. And so in August, whatever paperwork was done was refiled. And so on that specific day, they came. And I remember them asking me a slew of questions about my mom's boyfriend and the extent of, his behavior. And, I told them. And in the midst of it, which I didn't recall until we had a conversation with, one of the cold case detectives, but now that portion of the day is filled in. But I questioned them about where my sister was, because she hadn't been there in some time. And it was on that day that they did the missing persons report. So.
And that would kind of turn into the key in terms of identifying her.
Correct.
Wow. So it's kind of a big coincidence that CPS thing even got filed on that day.
Right. I mean, I don't even know like why it would, I don't know how the system works. I don't know how any of that works, but yeah, they showed up. It was I remember one police officer particular, because we were in like the driveway of the apartment complex, and he was just asking me like, so does he do this? Does he do this? And it was just like, why are you asking me all these questions?
Yeah.
Like, who told you and why does it matter? So
yeah.
I don't know if somebody tipped them off or was, like I'm really curious as to where that was generated from.
Yeah. Now I know when we spoke earlier, another thing that you've been kind of seems like I think you want a chance to respond to. So I kind of want to put it out there. There's a lot of people that look at this and start trying to figure out where to place blame. Like placing blame is just a really big problem all around this case. And your sister gets blame. Your mother gets blame. What are your feelings about that? And in real particular, I think we've covered the stuff with your sister. First of all, it's not sex work, it's sex trafficking, likely being groomed, controlled using typical power mechanisms that are done in these situations. How do you feel about what your mother was going through at that time?
I feel like she was failed. Just in hindsight, she really wasn't there mentally. I feel like, she was being taken advantage of. Like just looking at the mom that my brother recalls, a few years prior to the mom that was present at that time, to the mom that I have now, it's like there was something else going on at that point. And, our family was so targeted, I feel. And so for her, to try and move out of state and something happens, for her to give us back to the state and they keep giving us back, in her condition, it was just like, what are you guys seeing? Like I remember specific times where my mom, had her moments where she didn't want to be here.
Yeah.
And she would be like, call CPS, call 911. They'll get in contact with CPS and you guys can go back to the group home, you know. And I have a few pictures of her from that time. And that's how I remember her. She was in a chaotic state.
Yeah.
And so for her to have two girls and, you know, my sister's not going to school regularly. There's these DA filings of sex molesters. And, you know, it's just like, at what point does the system step in to say there's a problem, you know? And my mom made attempts over the years to get help. And her way of getting help was to have the state step in. And, you know, I recall like 3 specific times going to it was called the Valley of the Moon Children's Home. And every time we would go right back. And I don't know what propelled us to even be placed there in the first place, you know, but I'm more curious as to what allowed us to go back.
Yeah.
You know, like my mom really was she was in a whole different place, you know, and it was evident as a 7-year-old, it was very apparent.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it's pretty amazing to me that despite that, and despite you going through that and the back and forth, I feel like it's pretty clear that you realize this isn't a choice your mother was making. Like, she's being affected by things. This isn't a bipolar disorder is not a choice for people. The stuff that she was facing was not a choice for her. How are your feelings with her now? Are you in a good spot with her at this point?
Oh, we have a beautiful relationship.
Yeah.
We really reignited our relationship after my first daughter was born. She's 8. And then I started allowing her to be present. But after my second daughter, who's soon to be 6, she moved to Texas because she wanted to be closer to her grandkids.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think I just started really allowing myself to hear what she had to say, like just have real conversations. Because she's always like, how are the girls? You know, how are you? How are you? Like, she's very, you know, she's very loving and very caring. So her conversations are always just like genuine, but it would never get deeper than that. And then at some point, I was just like, who is my mom? You know, like, I know what the media said. I know what certain people have said, but like for myself, who is she? You know?
Right.
And so I just started really having conversations, like deep conversations. And I was like, wow, like I'm my mom. You know, like I saw that parallel of just her heart just being so genuine. And, you know, everything she does from a place of love. You know, so if she errs, it's because she doesn't know or she can't, you know?
Yeah.
So
yeah,
it's like, and even she said it. She's like, you know, I wish I could have been who I am now back then, you know? So.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, I can't imagine. I mean, people feel like that in general, but then when you have a terrible occurrence like this, you know, as like this big signpost of your past. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I saw that I've seen some comments from you where it sounds like, I don't know if there's some controversy, but what happened around Georgia's funeral? Because I saw a comment that made it sound like, was the family not told about it? Is that why you guys couldn't be there, or what happened with that?
So after my sister died, there was a funeral. And I remember being there. I remember wanting to open up because it was a closed casket.
Yeah.
And I remember wanting to open up the casket and someone stopping my hand, you know, because there's this big old picture of my sister. And I don't even think I've ever been to a funeral before then, but it was just like, I wanted to see, like, I didn't understand like her being dead and her being like gone. I just was like, why am I looking at a picture and not my sister?
Yeah.
But it wasn't until last year when I came across an article where they had mentioned that the coroner had finally released her body the next year.
Yeah.
And there was a funeral performed. And so I questioned some people about that because I didn't know that the funeral that I went to was not an actual funeral. And the extent of it was someone chose to not have us be present. So in my mom, and I asked my mom, I said, did you know like that Georgia was the funeral? Because she remembers that funeral, because there's certain people that was there. And I said, did you know that Georgia was buried like a year later? And she said, no, what are you talking about? And so I kind of went into details about her being kept for a certain amount of time and then them finally releasing her. And she didn't know about it.
Wow.
I asked my brothers, I said, did you know that she had a funeral in 98? And they're like, you mean the one? Because when my sister died, my oldest brother was like young 20s, he had children, and the dynamic of my sister passing, in addition to everything else that was going on, he wasn't able to be there. Same thing with my other brother. So he thought I was referring to that funeral. And I said, no, like when she actually went into the ground, that was in 98.
Yeah.
He didn't know about that.
Yeah.
And so when I had a conversation with someone else, and I was just like, yeah, Georgia had a funeral in 98. And their response was, yeah, that's one of my biggest regrets is not having you and your mom go. So I'm not going to give too much highlight to that or that person, but we didn't know.
No, and you guys were in Georgia at this time, right? You had moved in with your
I moved to Georgia in April, and I believe my sister was buried in May.
Right. That's pretty terrible. And how do you ever make up for that? I don't know. I don't know if you can. I guess at this point, we're going to talk about some of the upswing around this. And one of those is a voice that has dropped in on the interview here a few times. Maria Martin. Who is Maria Martin, and how has she helped you with your efforts?
So Maria is like a newfound sister. Officially, she's our family advocate. We just had to give her a title of some sort. I had this long drawn out title because I was like, you're way more valuable than just a family advocate. But she actually messaged me a few weeks before the candlelight vigil we had in November. And she sent this long message basically saying like, hey, I've heard about your sister's story. You don't know me. I'm not crazy. I just want to offer whatever services I can. I have this background, I know these people. And if you need anything, like I'm here for you. And I was like, okay, and in our first conversations, it was really, genuine.
Yeah.
But I think what really sealed the deal was the candlelight vigil. She's like, okay, I'm gonna go there. I'm gonna be there. And I was like, you don't have to, She's like, no, I'm gonna be there. And so I didn't realize how far she lived. And I remember, I think I was on my layover, and she's like, okay, yeah, I'm gonna pick you up because she wanted to pick me up from the airport. She's like, okay, I have about, 3 more hours to go. And I was just like, okay. And so when she finally picked me up, and I was like, do you eat egg? Because California. She's like, yeah. I was like, no, I know it's bacon. I was like, do you eat bacon? And so I got her, a Starbucks sandwich, and she was just like, oh, thank you, I'm starving. And she's like, oh, I've been driving. I was like, how long was your drive? She's like, oh, it's 7 hours. And mind you, we still had an hour to go to Santa Rosa because I flew into San Francisco.
Yeah.
So I was like, you drove 7 hours?
That's a big statement.
One way.
Yeah. Yeah.
And she was pregnant at the time, so it was just like newly pregnant. So, you're just like tired and And I was just like, whoa, who is this woman that just landed in my lap? Like God is good, like, because I felt her sincerity.
Yeah.
And, since, she's helped with social media, putting out calls to action. One of the biggest things she's done is the calling for artists. You know, before, a certain point last year, there was like 4 pictures of my sister that I knew of. And so she was just like, we can have artists recreate pictures of Georgia. And I was just like,
that's really sweet.
Oh, we can, like it was new to me. And I think one of the first art pieces I got was this girl. She had George's picture and there was like a lot of art around it. And I was just like, so I saw the vision that she had.
Mm-hmm.
And so when it was one of the pictures or artworks that I received, and it was just like, it was beyond breathtaking.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, like I have something that I didn't have.
In your home. Yeah, that's a new memory. It's like getting a hug from your sister. Yeah. That's awesome. What a great thought. Yeah, thank you for sharing that with us. I think that's something that a lot of people out there might remember. That's really, really special. I want to know a little bit about a phrase that I'm seeing you use a lot. What does justice has no expiration date mean to you?
So I created that. I think it was a little bit after the candlelight vigil. I was in a place of frustration because at that point, the police weren't really responsive. And so I was just like, man, like, why is this taking so much to do what is right? I felt like certain people weren't talking. So it was just like all these emotions of being at a place where I just felt like there was nothing that was going to happen. And, I get in my head sometimes where I just try and like, see the bigger picture and be optimistic. And I was just like, it doesn't matter how long it takes, but we'll get justice.
Yeah.
And so in that moment, I was just like, justice has no expiration date, whether it's 5 years, 20 years, 30 years.
Yeah.
We'll get it.
I remember you calling me after that had sprung into your head. By the way, the reason I didn't chime in when you were talking about the art is because maybe I'm like super postpartum-y, but I'm like crying the entire time. I figured only one of us should be crying right now.
You guys are going to get me started if both of you are going.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, just going back to the art thing, we now have over 50 beautiful interpretations of Georgia. And so many people have offered to send hard copies of their work. And it's just such a beautiful thing. And the community that has backed Angel up and has supported us in our work is unbelievable and irreplaceable. It's amazing. But going now to your justice has no expiration date. I remember when you called me and told me about that. And then a couple of days later, you had, hashtagged that. And it had started to sort of become synonymous with the Justice for Georgia Lee Moses hashtag. So those two things had always gone together. And I remember seeing you and I had a conversation about someone else had used that. And, it hit your heart in a different way, because for you, it's not just a clever hashtag. For you, it is so deeply ingrained in your commitment to Georgia and your commitment to seeing this through. And I remember very distinctly you saying, I reached out to those people just because it was so important to me that this just be Georgia's, because Georgia gets overshadowed in everything. So more so than just justice has no expiration date being a clever and powerful thing to say, it's important that it's just Georgia's. And those people were kind enough to stop that and acknowledge that they saw it and thought it was clever and just wanted to use it for themselves. But and I think that's a really important factor to include, is that it's not just clever, it is also just Georgia's. Yeah. And that is something that Angel did for her. And that is something that is so powerful and special. So in addition to the meaning that Angel gave, that I think is what resonates with the rest of the community, is that that's something that is so important to her specifically.
I love that. And I love that it's just like another sign. Like if you look at this, the story that we've talked about just in the interview segment here today, there's like these special kind of snaps that happen, just these kind of cosmic things with this case. And I know you were sharing some stuff before we even started recording where you're having special moments where you know Georgia is guiding those moments for you. To know that I'm talking to Georgia's sister and her name is Angel, I'm pretty sure you're the one with an angel sitting on your shoulder as well.
It's funny you say that because I just be in thought mode, and a few months ago I was just like, it's so crazy that my sister's name is Georgia, my name is Angel. I moved to Georgia and she became my angel. It's just like, out of all the places to move. And I remember when I was told I was moving there, like, I was just like, how am I going to live in a state named after my sister?
Seriously.
Like, I had to really just, like, not think about it. But I really feel like this is just her time, and when I look at all these moments, like even down to me, my brother reuniting, it's like out of all the times for us to reunite, we did at a point in time where we needed to heal together. So now, and I spoke to my brother yesterday and said, it's like time stopped, when Georgia died, and none of us were able to grieve collectively. We didn't get to say our final goodbyes. We didn't get to hug each other and cry. I was in therapy briefly, but nothing was said. Me and my mom didn't hug and cry about it. It really became something that was just not talked about. And I don't think that's, coincidental. I feel like, there's people that just felt like it wasn't priority. And so now, like, even before I decided to come public, because, I would call the police department, get an update, but I have a really high respect for authority. And if they say they're going to do their job, that means you're going to do your job. There's a reason why things aren't taken off and new leads, and there's a reason. And it's not because you're not doing your job, it's because there's just nothing available. Well, little did I know, no, people don't do their jobs. But even before then, it's like my heart was being prepped for it. And I remember distinctively, I had this friend, and like all of 2019, God was like, she's not going to be in your life. You're going to have to get rid of her. And, I was just like, get rid of a friend for what? Like, we've been friends for all this time. And, in hindsight, I see stuff, but it was just like, for me, it was so hard. And I remember there was a point in our friendship where I gave her the sister slot. She was going through some things. And I remember just really, like, in my heart, gravitating to her more because I didn't want to lose another sister.
Yeah.
So when God was like, you know, your time with her is coming to an end, that was really, really difficult. And so, you know, I was at a point where I was just like, didn't know where I belonged in life. I was trying to find my birth father. Miss Leah Raleigh, who started up a children's home in my sister's honor.
Yeah, we know
she
about
had
her.
passed.
Yeah.
And so it was just like all these things were just like happening. And then it came time for me to sever ties with my friend. And I remember God telling me that you're getting ready to do something. Like, you have to get ready for your future. And honestly, I thought it was in reference to my husband because, you know, he was going through his entrepreneurship role. And a few months later, I, you know, had a moment and I had to, like, I was about to like lose my mind. And it was just like, for whatever reason, at that point, my sister's death was just so profound. Like, it was just like I couldn't breathe. And God was like, give it to me. You have to give it to me. And I was just like, and I knew what it meant, but I didn't want to trust him with the process.
Yeah.
And so I was like, eventually I was like, okay, you know, I trust that you'll solve her case.
Yeah.
And after that, it's like everything just took off, and all these encounters, like even with meeting Maria and, you know, certain tidbits of information, and, you know, even, you know, me finally coming public, you know, and not just fighting behind, you know, a phone call or an email. Like, it's literally like the stars aligned, and it's like it's time for Georgia to get her justice. So
Yeah, and I'm so proud to be part of your journey from here, and to know that the thousands of people that are watching this video, you guys are all at the start as well. Like, this is something that's only been going on. It's been less than a year at this point, but there's also something really special coming up with this that I think is going to push it into the next level. And that is a podcast that you guys are doing. Maria's part of that as well, right?
yes. So it's actually kind of like her baby. She's the creative brains behind that. But when I think it really worked out how in sync we are and how similar we are. Because one of the things when I came public was I just wanted to tell my sister's story in a manner that did her justice.
Yeah.
You know, I've always been creative. I've always kind of been a storyteller. Writing is therapeutic for me. And so I was just like, I didn't really know what podcast was. I remember listening to one podcast about my sister, and I was like, well, if they can do it, and you know, it, like, I didn't really care that they laughed. You know, I'm just really sensitive, but there were certain things that, you know, was funny, and I'm just like, you don't mix laughter and death, but everybody has their thing.
Yeah.
But I felt like if they could do it, I could do it, you know? And in my mind, it was just like, there's details about my sister's case. There's details about her life that nobody knows. Nobody cared to even question. You know, there's my brother's story. There's my mom's story. There's people that knew my sister that didn't get a chance to tell their story,
Right.
you know? And so I was floating with a few different things. But when Maria came on board, she's like, what do you think about doing a podcast? And I was like, you know what? That was one of my options. And, you know, she lives in LA, so she definitely has a creative background and a lot of expertise and knowledge. And so we got together and thought up, you know, a plan, and a lot of the information was already there because we were already, you know, talking to people and, you know,
Doing the work.
right. And she understood what was important,
Yeah.
and the voice that I wanted to convey. And so she does what she does, and she's awesome. So
What's the name of it?
they called her Georgia Lee.
They called her Georgia Lee. And when is it going to be coming?
So good.
Here comes the creative voice.
Yes. Sorry. So, if it had not caught on yet, I had a baby a month ago. And so originally we had planned to release it a month ago, but then my son came early. So we had to put that off for just a little bit. But we actually discussed last night, confirming with iTunes our release date because they were just waiting on us. So we are confirming all that information, and we are going to put that up on our social media pages. Likely Monday or Tuesday, we'll have our exact first episode release date.
Perfect. Perfect. And we'll have links in the description box below to all those social media pages. And we're going to talk about them here in a moment. But just to make sure we wrap up this episode correctly, if people have information, we do have the contact information for the Sonoma County Sheriff's Department down below in the description box. But you guys have also set up an email address for tips, right?
Correct. It's what happened to Georgia Lee at gmail.com.
And that's spelled Lee, right? Because I'm seeing
Correct.
her. Okay.
Yeah. Correct. So her actual middle name is Leah.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize that until last year. So for the sake of continuity and what the world has come to know her as, we still say Lee, but transitioning that Leah in there as well.
Yeah. And I did see that something was going on with the reward. Has that been straightened out? What is the reward at now?
So currently it's at $25,000.
Okay.
There's $2,500 that is from the Sonoma County Alliance Fund, I want to say. The initial $15,000 reward that was raised, there's no trace of that. No one knows who donated it. Yeah, bad police work on that. So
yeah,
I
that's
just
weird.
decided,
losing track of a reward. I've never heard of that before.
Yeah, I mean it was beyond negligent in that regard. Yeah.
Okay, and
I mean, there's a lot of things.
Yeah,
yeah, we try and, well, more so me. Maria, she's very straightforward, and I love her because she's like the yin to my yang, or yang. I don't know, something like that. Whatever the proper way to say it, but I like to kill them with kindness while still being respectful. And I feel like the few times I do rev up, that's just when it's at a point of like, oh my goodness. But for the sake of people not devaluing the Sonoma County Sheriff's Department, they're doing better.
Yeah.
They can still do better, but accountability, is a big thing, and slowly but surely, progress is being made.
Well, that's why I honestly feel like the podcast is the next natural step. I mean, just to see the results you've gotten already, you've at least gotten them to push out an update. You've at least gotten them to kind of ask the public for help again. In this case, now we're gonna keep shaking that can a little bit. We're gonna have this podcast come out, maybe some more details. If nothing else, we're going to get a much more personal connection to Georgia established with the people out there. That's probably going to raise interest and maybe make a little noise. There's nothing wrong with making a little noise. Let them know.
I feel like, honestly, that's the biggest thing is, for 23, almost 24 years, my sister has been misrepresented. Who she is down to her name has been incorrect, and so now there's a time where the stars aligned and all the gaps of who she was down to her name are coming together. And it's only right that her memory be remembered correctly.
Absolutely.
So.
Yeah. We got to honor her. She had a short life, and we need to honor that. But we also need to honor your journey as well. And I want to say I really appreciate how open you are about your faith, your spirituality, but also how open you are in telling this story. You let those tears roll down your face, and your voice doesn't shake for a second. You have power in those tears, and I want you to remember that as you guys are rolling into this new podcast. Just staying open and sharing that, because that's one thing people will connect with: authenticity. If you have your heart coming out like that, you're going to bring people with you, and we're all going to ask for change together. Speaking of which,
say this.
Yeah.
Sorry, I do want to say this. I realized early on that, me fighting for justice isn't just about me getting justice for my sister. And, when you look at Twitter, you look at Facebook, you look at Google, and you see all these families that are going through the same thing, it's a process.
Yeah.
And I realize I'm strong because I have to be. And through that, I'm just hoping that other people can get the justice that they deserve, as well as not having to go through what I went through. None of it should be in vain, and when we talk about the media and the police and all these other systems of failure, if nobody talks about it, nothing's going to be done, so fighting for justice is so much bigger than just me in Georgia. There's thousands and thousands of families out there that are going through the same thing.
And you're honoring her in such a special way, because you're also showing the trait that she showed you the most too. She was fighting for you at home when she was there. She was fighting to give you a good life. There is a change.org petition. I saw a note on it. Are you guys going to be closing that soon, or is that going to be open for a little bit?
It's actually closed. It was closed last year. I don't know why it still looks like it's open, but it was closed, and we sent it to everybody in California.
You did send it.
That's part of why I feel the detective actually got assigned to the case. But
okay, you do have a GoFundMe that is currently running.
Correct.
Okay, so we'll have that link down below. And on behalf of myself and my amazing supporters, people that contribute through Patreon and PayPal, we're going to be making a donation to that just as soon as I'm done filming today as well.
Thank you.
Okay, so how do we keep up to date on the case? Where can we follow you guys?
Facebook, Instagram. That's where we do our most updates. Then we also have YouTube and her website, where I typically post my articles, like if I want to write something like that's an article type format, but those are the places to follow.
And we've got links for all of that in the description box down below. Angel.
One last Twitter and Angel TikTok. You have a TikTok.
You're on TikTok now?
You have a TikTok, and that is a platform that we love. It's just we just don't have a lot of followers on it, so we don't often mention it, but I'm
not really big on TikTok. Like, I have to really be in just like my baby is Twitter. I feel like Twitter, I can reach anybody at any time. Like, I am a troll fanatic. That's why my handle is Catch My Sister's Killer, Solve Her Murder, because I feel like when I troll, if they see that, it's like, wait a minute, what?
Yeah.
But I do have a TikTok. I'm not. It's different. Like, there's people on TikTok that literally just share their story, and they do a wonderful job. I feel like my storytelling is more long and drawn out, so I normally just put pictures and tidbits of information. But yeah, I have a TikTok. I don't even know what it is, but it's something. Look up Georgia Lee.
All right, well, we'll have that down in the description box down below as well. Big thank you to both Angel and Maria for joining us here today. Please remember to keep me posted on anything that's going on, and if there is anything that I can do to help you guys, please don't hesitate to reach out. Also, when the podcast drops, be sure to throw me in on a tweet for that. And I'm certainly going to let my audience know about the podcast release as well.
Thank you so much. Thank you for this. This was a really, I know we talked about my little hesitancy with the media and people portraying my sister's story, but
totally understandable.
Thank you.
You got it.
Lifted a burden, so thank you.
And this has been really wonderful. Thank you so much.
You got it. If you're looking for any of the links that we mentioned in the interview to help support and follow Angel and Maria as they go through this, check the description box down below. You'll find this one down there as well. This is for the website, georgialeemoses.com. Also, the Sonoma Sheriff's Office has a program called Silent Witness. If you need to submit a tip but you want to remain anonymous, you'll have this link that you'll find also down in the description box down below. Despite the fact that it has address fields, phone numbers, your name, you can leave anything that you want blank on this and then just come in, drop in your tip, and then submit it. So this is a good way if you're worried about your phone number being traced or something like that, you can just use this link down below. You don't have to fill in all the information that they're asking for here. You can if you want to, but if you want to be anonymous, that's just one way to do it. Also, down below, we'll have a link for the GoFundMe. If you want to add to the amount that we are donating together, please feel free to hit that link. I'd appreciate it if you help support them and their efforts with trying to take on this really, really tough case. Next month, it's going to be 24 years with no Georgia, no answers, and no justice for Angel and her family. Will you help us? Please help us raise exposure. Please share this video with friends that you may have in California. We need people to see that suspect shot. We need someone that thinks they know this person from back at that time to do the right thing, pick up the phone, send in an anonymous tip, use the email address that Angel gave us directly. Just get that information in, put it in play, and let's try to help this family find justice for Georgia. I really appreciate your help in terms of doing that. Once again, thank you to all of my amazing supporters on PayPal and Patreon. A big thank you to new patrons, Bex Effect, Barbara T, Julianne Jasper, and Lois Trail. If you'd like to help support the channel, please visit lordandarts.com where you can sign up for Patreon, PayPal, buy merchandise, or just buy us a coffee like James Reed recently did. Take care, everyone. Stay safe. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you back here on Monday with a brand new episode of Case Cracked on the Lord and Arts channel.